Well, good morning, everybody. Leigh Farnell here from Everyday Empowerment Institute. And this morning we've got a fantastic interview with Marshall Thompson, who runs the Little Sup coffee shop down in Cottesloe, but he's done a whole lot more than that, and you're going to find out a lot more about Marshall and how he's moved up that ladder of business evolution. So, Marshall, welcome to the Everyday Empowerment Institute podcast.
Oh, good morning, Leigh. How are you?
I'm very well, mate, very well. Now, it's very stormy outside. Normally we're down the beach this time of day or, an hour ago. Your team is serving coffee. It's a thriving business, but I want to today dig down into you as an entrepreneur, because you and I have spoken many times about your entrepreneurial journey. You've got so many different businesses. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen for a second, and I'm going to spark some ideas in you just to get you thinking, just so that you get an idea of what we're doing here at Everyday Empowerment Institute. Our goal is to be empowering the entrepreneur in everybody, helping people with personal growth and development, career advancement, and business growth, and getting people part of a community to learn and help and empower each other, because we know that as entrepreneurs are the basis of communities. Also, when people work in companies, you want them operating as what we call intrapreneurs, as if it's their own business. And I know you've got a whole range of staff down there, so I'm going to get your insights into those kinds of things, and particularly how you've taken a business idea and moved it up the ladder to either running on its own or selling it off to others. And we're going to tap in on your story. So before we even do that, tell us a bit about the Marshall Thompson story, the background.
Okay, I grew up in the country, small public school. Father and mother were sort of working class, so nothing spectacular background.
Oh, yeah.
Had dyslexia, and I'm probably ADD with my attitude. So some difficulties at school. So I didn't pass my leaving high school. So I went off to work. Then from there, graduated through a number of progression of different experiences, and which have been wide and varied. But nothing formal, no formal background, just, I suppose, hard work was the most important thing of all of what I did. So didn't come from an academic background, probably driven by the need to get ahead and coming from that working class background. So for me, it was just a very simple early part of my life. But
Mate,
did lots of crazy things.
Well, first of all, we know from an entrepreneurial point of view, you Google dyslexic entrepreneurs, and everyone from Richard Branson to Ted Turner. There are many, many, many people. In fact, I think it's Kevin Bacon, one of the guys on the Shark Tank in America. It's not unusual that entrepreneurs, business people, actually have had learning difficulties. In fact, even my own business partner, Gary, not dissimilar. You start to look at things from outside the box straight away to say, it's very interesting. Even Robert Kiyosaki talks about the fact that so often people who stay within the tram tracks, study hard, get a good job, go to university, they end up working for entrepreneurs, dyslexics, and people who've had learning difficulties. So that's a very good story. So what did your father do in the country town? What was his job?
My father was a builder, laid concrete, tiled. My mother just worked around the local community. But every weekend I'd go home for most of the time that I left after I left school, go home, work with my dad laying tiles, and then I was lucky enough, I got a job with MG Kalis at Exmouth when they built the new factory up there.
Uh-huh.
And went up to work on oysters, but ended up working in a factory. And you meet a whole variety of people of different nationalities, economic backgrounds, social backgrounds. And I think that's a really good, broad basis for life, building this sort of, I say the common people, it's not being rude, but I'm just saying that ability to, it doesn't matter who you are or what you are. I don't look at you any differently because we're all people.
Well, first of all, you connect with people. Now, by the way, the MG Carters did a lot of work with Alex and the team, and I've done some myself. We set strategic planning, so I know the Carters very well. We've done a lot of great things with the MG Carters group over the years. But straight away, what it tells me is work ethic. your father being a hard worker and you just being happy to get in, roll your sleeves up and get the job done. That's different than not having work ethic and not willing to roll the sleeves up and get things done. So when did you go from being employee to employer? When did you get the idea, I'm going to start my own business, or how did that all come about?
Well, that's quite a long journey. So worked for MG Kalis, came back, went back to tech college to try and get my leaving at what was in those days. Went through, got a couple of subjects, got my points. Happened to fluke a job with fisheries, went and worked for fisheries, a fisheries technician for 3 years. Decided, no, I'll go back to university, went off to Murdoch for a year, got offered a job at Conservation Environment doing environmental studies for 3 years. And then I worked for a couple of fishing companies, Kalis in France, then left. But Kalis in France was a very interesting example that they had, and I read some of your background. They are great. I had a great mentor there, and I also had a great mentor in conservation environment, a guy called John Bass, which I'll talk about in a minute. But had great contact mentors, and just went through, worked for Kalis in France, worked for MG Kalis, then went out on my own.
Well, let's just stop there for a second. Let's talk about the impact of those mentors, what they did, what are some of the things you remember them telling you to do, or even correcting your behaviour or your thinking. Give me some examples and insights that you remember now, and as you say, it's probably, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, however long ago it was.
Yeah,
so give me some of those significant moments, significant conversations you remember from your mentors.
Yeah, probably the first one was a guy called John Bass. He was a marine scientist at the Department of Conservation Environment, and I worked as a diver and technician collecting marine specimens, and I had to write reports. And because of my dyslexia, I had immense problems. For example, I would write the word "the" in a sentence 3 times, but couldn't read it. So it would be the. He actually got me to focus. Just by quietly talking about what your goals were, what you were trying to achieve, to be able to focus on what you were writing. And I suppose that was my first big impact from a mentor who actually identified a problem but didn't see it as a difficulty. And that's probably a big step. He saw there's a problem. I was bright enough to do what I do, and he actually gave me some techniques and some protocols, I suppose, for me to be able to overcome, and I still use those today. I read everything 3 times. I write a lot slower. I think about what I'm going to write a lot quicker. So that was probably the most instrumental part for me in learning to get to the next stage of my career.
Wow, how significant is that? I mean, again, I'm just going to share one of the slides that we use here is by breaking down the journey into smaller steps. And here, as you say, the mentor has helped you break that down into smaller steps in terms of how to understand, how to read, how to focus. And of course, the other thing we talk about at Everyday Empowerment Institute is inner world dialogue, inner world conversation, the importance of stillness. So he again has got you to just calm down and again take what you might have considered to be a difficulty, and probably other people had called it a difficulty for you, and he's reframed it and said it's not a difficulty. We call it same old thinking will get you same old results, but your mentor there has actually got you to look at a problem or a challenge as not a challenge.
Yeah, and he did. And what it did after that, and I didn't see when you're dyslexic, especially, a lot of the time you see it as a fault in the armour, I suppose is the best way to describe it. Once he actually got me to understand it, it was a difficulty, but it wasn't something that was going to hold me back. It just meant, and it comes on to the next sort of part of my strategy for what I do, is I realised then I just have to do 10% more.
10% more as in 10% more work?
Everything. 10%. Everything I do in my life, I've got to do 10% more.
I'll call that the Marshall's 10% extra law. I like it.
And what you do is if you do 10% more, I probably don't do that now, I've got to my age, but when I was in my main part of my career, I worked out I went to work 10 minutes earlier and left 10 minutes later. If I did 10% extra work, at the end of the week, regardless if I was deficient in what I was doing, I did 50% more than everyone else. So along the way, you couldn't help but get ahead.
Fantastic.
You just do that a little bit more, and every day you just do that little bit more, right?
Wow.
So if you're doing 8 hours, I'm going to do 8 hours and 30 minutes. I'm going to do 8 hours and 40 minutes. And like the same thing you'll find with the shop, we try and do a little bit more than what we do with our copy, but I'll talk about that later. So that was the first one. The second one, I worked with a guy called Theo Kalis and Murray France at Kalis in France, right?
Yep.
Two fantastic gentlemen who probably influenced my life more than anything else in terms of my later business acumens. They were always big picture. They were always have a go. And for me, it was like a rule. If it doesn't kill anyone and if it doesn't cost too much money, do it, right? Right? And as long as it don't hurt anyone along the way, just have a go. Because in the end, if you're not doing anything which is bad, socially reprehensible, going to cost you a fortune and send you broke, then have a go. And they did things like they chucked me on planes and sent me to Japan. We had a factory down. I went and ran some factories in the country, and a guy called John Stratton, which we called the Rat because he was a very clever person.
The Rat.
And what happened was John took me down to Busselton to look at a factory and just gave me the keys and said, right, you're in charge now. I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. And what they had is the innate ability to actually trust people and also to give people a go, right? Within bounds, right? Within bounds. I had a restricted boundary which I could work to, and that allowed me to go. But I knew nothing about wages. I knew nothing about staff. I knew nothing about processing the fish. I knew nothing about refrigeration. And there was an old guy called Carl Kolofsky, and Carl was a character in lots of ways. He probably owned half the bricks in the Ship Hotel at Busselton. But Carl taught me that from an engineering point of view, nothing's difficult. It's only made of parts. And all you got to do is remember where the parts go and how to put them back together, and therefore you can do it. So I actually got to the point where I could pull a compressor to pieces.
Wow.
Only because these characters, and they were characters, actually, most of them let you have a go. And I think one of the things that happens in life today, people don't get a chance to have a go. Right? You have to then step outside the business community to work for yourself, to be given those opportunities. I was lucky enough along the way to have a go. So they were probably those two guys, Murray France and Theo Kalis, Theo particularly, probably were the two that gave me the biggest impetus to go and do what I've done with my life.
Mate, as you say, besides the 10% extra law, they have a go. I mean, you can say it's a repeating theme there. And then that what an empowering line. Nothing is difficult.
Nothing is difficult.
That is just
You can do probably if you move on then from the next guy I worked for. I went out and ran my own consultancy company for a little while. We imported bait and I marketed lobster for a lobster company out of Cervantes. We did a marketing and operational role in Africa, in Tanzania, for a little while. And then I got seconded to come and help a guy who had a small public company to sell the prawns for him, a guy called Joe Rottendella. Now, Joe is a renowned character in Fremantle. He is a crazy man. I love him, but I hate him, if you know what I mean. But he probably was the next mentor in lots of ways. And he had two rules. Think big, right?
Yeah.
If you were going to look at a project, he'd actually look at it and say, "Why are you doing that? Why do 1,000 projects for $1 when you can do one project for $1 million?" Right?
Wow.
And so we would do things like go to lunch incessantly, looking for the deal, right? Or but he was good. He was a big thinker. He was responsible for the development of Port Coogee.
Wow.
He bought all that land when no one looked at the land in Port Coogee, the meat works, the chemical works. He was slowly buying up the land because he had vision to look 20 years ahead.
Wow.
And I suppose his legacy for me is to look ahead, Don't look at what you're doing now. Look ahead far enough to where you want to be and what you need to try and achieve, and don't race too much after the small things. So if you combine all those three aspects.
Wow.
And then
So you said 2 rules. So think big and look 20 years ahead. Would that be?
Yeah,
What
I look ahead. Doesn't matter how long ahead. It might be, if you're small and you've just bought a house, you might look 2 or 3 years ahead. If you're looking for a business, you might be looking for your strategic plan, but you're going to look at a big long-term strategic plan, not only for your business, but for the people within the business, for your family, those sort of things. Where am I going to do? What's the succession plan if you look at a large company? If I'm working crazy hours like we all have when we get to do business, what happens to your family? How do you actually embrace them into this longer term plan? You can do it for a while, but generally what happens, you can't do it forever, because if you do it forever, eventually you burn out. You have to. So they're the sort of philosophies I work on. And the same thing. Now I'm probably pretty slackly. I don't work as much. I try and enjoy myself. I try and surf more. I probably try and spend more time with my family than I have done before. Appreciate grandchildren, children, staff, all those sorts of things you want to try and do, because it's an important part of your life.
Absolutely, mate. So just on that, I mean, one of the things that got you and I talking was you had helped your daughter, who is also a real goer, set up a business just up the road from you at SUP. Now, without going into all of the detail about the bureaucracy, which is, when we talk about this a ladder of business evolution, when you're trying to get go from what we call non-existence, just an idea about the business, you're trying, whether it be you with the coffee shop or any of the businesses, but her with the fitness yoga studio, there are always resistive forces. And in this case, there was resistive forces from the council, but sometimes there's resistive forces in terms of our own doubt. So I'd love let's just talk about the journey of getting your daughter from an idea to getting that business up and running to where it is now, because that in itself is a great entrepreneurial story. You want to just give us a bit of an insight there?
Okay, so where we are, the people who own the Ocean Beach Hotel, Queen Elizabeth's great family, and that which we lease from, I've always wanted the laundry next door. A bit of a story. One of the laundry next door, David said no, but he did in passing one day with COVID say, what about the backpackers? And we thought, why not? That's not a bad idea. There's got to be something. It's a great location, and with any business, I think some of the biggest rules is location, parking, people, right? It had all the ingredients. So firstly, identify the ingredients that you think the business is going to be successful. So it had the ingredients. So I said, let's do it. The biggest difficulty was it wasn't the landlord. He was enthusiastic. It wasn't people. It was the expectation, I suppose, of what the council or what the community, probably the council, and in terms of way they're structured, believe that things should happen. And that is the resistance force. They've got a view that you say no, right? First thing is, I suppose it goes back to one of my strongest philosophies. There's no such word as no.
Well, there's another important rule. There's no such word as no. I like that one.
Right. And you know why? Because it's only money and effort that fixes it, right?
Yeah.
Right. So,
wow.
So for me, if someone goes in anyone who works for me and they go no, I say no. There's no such word as no. And the Chinese are very, if you go if you travel overseas and work overseas, which I've done quite a lot, inevitably the Chinese will never say no. Maybe we'll look at it. So for me, there's no. And I'll give you an example. When I worked for Joe, we had a problem with a boat which fished in Indonesia coming into Darwin with a gearbox. Everyone goes, you can't get a gearbox. Impossible. Hang on, gearboxes are made all around the world, right? How can you get it? Fine. So you go out, pick up the phone. This thing is the most amazing thing in the world. You can find anything in the world with that. Wow. And because you sit in Perth, doesn't mean you can't find something. So we found a gearbox in Singapore. How to get it from Singapore? Well, there is a plane. So all it was a matter of money.
Yeah.
And effort, I suppose.
Yeah.
We we got the gearbox from Singapore, half a ton, whatever it is, into Singapore, into the boat, faster than I could get one from Melbourne.
Wow.
So there's no such thing as no. It's only a matter of how wide you think. And I suppose the internet and the phone has made, and working for guys like Theo Kalis and Joe and these guys who are very entrepreneurial, but thought big.
Yes.
Thought big. So you go, I would normally have gone, there's no gearbox. If I had been a normal person, I'd run the local.
That's right. If I had been a normal person, I like that.
I'm not a normal person. I haven't because of my inflictions, right? My ADD. So you don't actually look at it. So you say, I would have probably looked at things. So for me, and I'll give another example. When I first started the surfboard business, I wanted a certain shape surfboard, right?
Mm.
No one here would sell them to me, and I had an idea. So we went to China and built them, right? Why not? With China, it's just. And my wife said to me, "You're crazy," which she thinks I am anyway. But we did that, and we built and we sold boards, and from that we sponsored the world tour. It was one of the minor sponsors for the world tour of stand-up paddles for 5 years, for the world tour with Tristan and Christian from AAP. Mm-hmm. But that was the same thing, right? There's someone doing it somewhere. Doesn't matter what you're doing, medical science, engineering, technology, somewhere in the world is better than you.
Yep.
And that's probably one of my things. There's always someone better than me. Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah.
Right? It's easier just to go and say, hang on, Leigh, you're whatever you are, an engineer, and you've invented a robotic sander for something, and I've got it in a factory in Lithuania. Well, just get on a plane and go to Lithuania, which you could in the old days. That's what we did.
Yeah.
And if we wanted, when we had our fish and chip shop, if we wanted chips, chips came from Belgium. Australia's not the only country that grows potatoes, for God's sake.
Right. Where was the fish and chip shop, by the way?
Oh, in Netherlands. That was probably my first entrepreneurial after being corporate and that. And I thought, had enough, and had a minor, what's the word? Not altercation, probably not the right word. A more inquiry from ASIC when we were as a public company, and that was enough for me. And so I. But that's another story.
Right. Well, that's all I was sort of. Now, I just want to share something with you as well. As you're talking here, what you're demonstrating, people say to us often, just tell us what we need to do. And what we say to people is, that your results come from your behaviour, and your behaviour comes from what you do. But if you just focus on the strategies without the mindset, everything from there's no such thing as no, think big, look over the horizon. So many of the mindset you've developed through osmosis and your life then means that have a go. Whereas some people, you give them the strategies, but they don't have the right mindset. So what you're demonstrating is the importance of developing your mindset, which of course is what we then do as a coach to go, how do we get you to move up this journey of getting the results you want? What you're demonstrating is the power and the importance of mindset and the importance of challenging your thinking process. We talk about what we call intellectual working capital. We say buildings don't think, people do. And your thinking, that's of course the importance of where the coaching and mentorings come in. So I just thought I'd share that, because what you're demonstrating is, your mindset is the thing that is driving you, not that you're necessarily consciously thinking that, but each of these key mantras around nothing is difficult, have a go, think over the horizon. Now, I note you say that in public company, as much as it's exciting to be able to work with all that capital, but then all of a sudden you don't then have the same freedom, I suppose, that may well have frustrated your desire to move quickly. Is that right?
Certain degrees, but we were very lucky. The structure of our company, we built a pearl farm in Burma, we had a fishing company in Indonesia, so we had lots of stuff that I worked on with lots of very good people. But then I suppose then I bought a fish and chip shop. I thought, right, I've had enough being an executive director of a public company. What am I going to do? I'd come from a fish background. I'll buy a fish and chip shop. And when you're sometimes as an entrepreneur, that first step of faith is the most difficult. And when you ring up, and a funny story my wife would tell you, I bought the fish and chip, they put the offer in, the guy who offered rang back to say we had accepted. I didn't want to take the phone call because I was too scared. Right. I thought, what the hell have I done? right? What the hell have I done? Right?
Faith and fear.
Yeah.
So how did you? Well, what made you then go on? You took the phone call.
You just grin and bear it. I've done it. Then you have to, once as my father used to say, if you feather your nest, you have to lay in it, don't you? So once you start these things, you've got to. And it took probably like all small businesses, there's a period of probably 3 or 4 years which you have to survive in. You have to work hard, scrimp and save, and through that time you look at what you're doing, why you're doing it, is it the right way? And I suppose from a fish and chip shop for me, and I was saying something the other day, there was an old series of processes that the old Italians and Greeks used to use.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any experience. I bought this fish and chip shop because I knew fish, and I knew that if you had good fish and you cooked it well, people would come. It was a simple thing. If you provide a good product, good service, and it's a bit like the coffee shop, if you provide good coffee, people will find and they will come, right? But getting to that process is actually, getting to that point is quite a process, right?
Yeah.
That you have, and I suppose, again, look outside the box is probably my mantra. Why? And I'll give you the example of potato chips. Potatoes are grown in Australia. There's a season when the chips are fantastic, and everyone's been to a fish and chip shop and they've bought fantastic chips and they've gone back 3 months later and the chips are all soggy on the ends and brown. Mm-hmm. Everyone's done.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone says, the fish and chip shop doesn't know what it is. Got nothing to do with the fish and chip shop. 80% to do with the product. Mm-hmm. So again, probably my approach to business, and I did in the coffee shop. Why is that happening? Be inquiring. Why? And it might be something to do with your staff. It might be something to do with your product. It might be something to do with the manufacturing system. Why is the problem? Look at the problem as in why, how, and when. How, why? What's the problem? How? How do I fix it? When? When do I fix it? Right? And the potatoes, for example, ring the manufacturer direct. Don't talk to the rep. Don't talk to the company. Ring the guy. Talk to the production manager on the floor of the factory in Melbourne. Look, my chips are buggered. What's wrong? Oh, chips are grown, put in a harvested fresh. Beautiful. Then they come out and they go in a cold store. As they go in a cold store, the structure of the potato changes, the nature of the chip changes. How do you fix that? Right? So that's the problem. How? Well, where else do they grow potatoes in the world? New Zealand? Their season's different now. It's Belgium, completely different hemisphere. So if Australian chips are good for 6 months and not so good for 6 months, why don't you just replace your chips for the 6 months that aren't good with chips from somewhere else when they're good? Mm-hmm. Very simple philosophy.
Simplicity, but you asked the question.
Yeah. So you firstly have to ask why. Why do you do things like that? I think it's like if you have a big company strategy and you might be doing something and you've always done it, and the tendency is to say, never to ask the question why. We've always done it like that. Why do we do it like that? Why do we get up in the morning and do it? Why do you guys get up in the morning and go for a swim? Because it's good for your health. You love it. There's community. There's reasons. Right?
All those reasons. Absolutely.
And that's probably the reason. So we did the fish and chip shop for 6 years. Very successful. Along the way, we built the surf business. I continued on with our fish business that we've got with my partner out at Niagara, Charlie. And Charlie runs the business, and I have some of my licenses that we work in together. Very good life. So that's the journey. So I've ended up at the coffee shop. The first
fantastic. So did you sell out of the fish and chip shop?
Again, it talked, and I think one of the things that Theo taught me is try and judge people, right, for what they are, not who they are. Mm-hmm. We had a fantastic landlord, a guy called Bruce Campbell. God rest his soul, passed away. Bruce always said to me, and our lease was very simple, and he said, while I'm here, Marshall, you don't have to worry. Bruce, unfortunately, got sick. The day he got sick, I said, I'll put the business on the market and sold it.
Clever.
Because he was a sort of person I dealt with. The Joe Rottendellas, their word was their bond. They weren't caught up with corporate factions, I suppose. So I sold out because of that, not because the business wasn't good. And then we decided we'd go down to find an office. And what the idea was, this OBH was going to be demolished. I said to Stan, have you got anything in the new building that I could do a business with. He said, no, but there's the 2 shops we're in now. You can have one of those if you want. And it was just going to be in my office.
Oh, yeah.
Then I met a guy who made good coffee, and I said, why don't you come in and make coffee, and I'll sell surfboards, and little stuff was done. But again, coffee, there's a good example. Coffee, about philosophy of how you work in life. We had a coffee supplier. The price of the coffee was X, quite high. Why? How much does it cost you to buy a green bean? How much does it cost you to roast it? What should you pay for it? What their margin? And they have to make a profit.
Sure.
But again, the question I asked was why, right? So we developed a coffee now where we use 3 beans from 3 different roasters. We blend ourselves, which is quite different, because then I've got control. So anyway, that's where I.
Beautiful.
That's where I
Beautiful.
That's the story.
And that's interesting in itself. I mean, we say because you're in motion, you're out looking. One thing leads to another. You've gone down there to get an office. Next minute, you meet a guy that makes coffee. Next minute, I'll sell surfboards. We make the coffee, and all of a sudden, you've got this unique environment right by the beach, making high quality coffee, and you've got the surfboards happening there. So whether in the summer, I mean, look, some of those days, isn't there? There's 20, 30 or more people hang around outside. There's a real community that's been developed there. But I just wanted to come back to people. Give me some insight to your choice of people, not only that you've done business with, but the people you work with. Obviously, the staff, coffee shop today, the fish shop. What are some of the rules and the strategies you use around either selecting, training, inducting people?
If I go back to my early day, I was terrible at it. I was absolutely a terrible selector of people, right?
What were you doing wrong in the early days?
I was probably too hard. I was too judgmental. I wasn't as considerate of their systems. I probably didn't take into account their needs apart from my needs. It was just do what I want and do it otherwise. And that probably took me a while to. And I think as an employee in a company of power, sometimes that can happen. You don't actually look at the other sides. As an employer, that changes. And I've always viewed, since I've had my own business, basically they're my family. And sometimes you have good family members, and some you have bad family members, but generally I treat them as family where I can. Qualifications are probably, this will probably get edited out, but I'll say it anyway. I have, because of my dyslexia and my educational problem, I always had a bit of a disdain for educated people. So it was more bullshit, more shit, and piled higher and deeper. Right? And that was in my early days. That was the attitude I took. So, and that was a chip on my shoulder, and I understand that. So that's which I've come. So now, generally, qualifications are less important than personality and the feel I get from people, right?
The feel you get from people, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's quite interesting that the ones who come highly recommended, especially say in the fish business and that, it's the guy who's the quiet guy who brings knives to the shop, who's the best filleter, who's the quieter guy, nice personality. And if you can select those, you can build a team, and you'll always have conflict. You'll always have probably jealousies, probably not the right word, but
just personality conflict, because people are different. Yep.
People are different. And I think the role as an entrepreneur, and I think Richard Branson's the sort of person who does it, and you saw that with Virgin, he builds his team, which is built about everyone being equal, everyone having a skill. You might be a great cook, I might be a great coffee maker, but you all make part of the team. And what happens in a lot of businesses I've seen, one section believes they are worth more than the other. So the guy who's out the back cleaning the floor and cleaning the factory, he's probably just as important as the guy who's selling the fish out the front. And the guy at the front who's selling the fish at the front sometimes has to be told that the guy at the back who's doing the work is just as important as you, even though you drive the fancy car and wear the suit. The guy in the Gungrees cleaning the fish does it. You can't do what you do without them. So it's all about trying to build a team, Leigh, and that's. I think it just takes time. I think that's where grey hair helps.
Where grey hair helps. Well, the Japanese have been very big with that whole idea of grey hair, haven't they? They'd respect the grey hair because with the grey hair comes wisdom. I mean, I want to share another slide that we use when we're coaching people and business, because what you've just demonstrated is what we call the grapevine theory of management. Because now, in my background behind me is a picture of the lake house, Denmark, which is my business partner has built up. As he said to me, I knew nothing about wines and vineyards 15, 20 years ago, but through the inquisitive mind and so much like yourself, quality, attention to detail, again, a bit of a disdain for qualifications. Mate, that won't get edited out, by the way. But for the vineyard to have order, one of the secrets behind that is this thing they call the fruiting wire or the training wire. And so it's got what are the behaviours we want. And what you've done there is two powerful pieces of behaviour. One, we're family and we're a team and we're all equal. And so then you start training the vine to behave as family, team and equal. And what happens is you take the behaviour you want, the strongest cane, and you reinforce it and say, mate, that's the behaviour you want. You've just behaved like a team player. You've just behaved as a member of the family. But when people behave outside of family or team or quality or friendliness or some of the key things you want, someone has to be there to prune and cut that behaviour. As mate, that's not on. So clearly, I would imagine along that line, besides family, team, quality, service, all the things, nothing's impossible. At times, you've had to do some trimming, without obviously talking about people's names. I don't mean trim as in sack people, although that's the extreme. Times when you go, mate, that's not the way we want to do it. Can you think of an example, even in the last 3 to 6 months, where you've had to correct someone's behaviour for stepping outside what you'd consider to be the way you want things done?
See, I'm probably a bit traditionalist. I have the three not rule. Right? I have
three what? The three what? The three not rule.
Three not rule.
Yeah.
Basically, everyone will make a mistake.
Yep.
So everyone makes a mistake and everyone does something wrong. So if you're working for me and you come along and you put the thing in the wrong place the first time, that's fine, right? You get told, coached that. You do it the second time, well, then you get probably a bit more chastised. Third time, you get chucked.
Right.
That's as simple as that.
So you get three chances.
3 chances, but not 3 chances of anything, because everyone, like if you take the young guys who come into the shop and they might be 14 or 15, they've had no life experience at all. They take a lot more trellising, if you like to call it, to get them to where they want. Some are capable of doing it, some of them aren't, right? And it's, I think, to a certain extent, employers have a lot harder time now with the modern youth. Wealth, privilege, entitlement, all those things which are difficult to actually run in a team operation. If you're very individualistic, it's very hard to meld. And I must have been the worst employer of the world, I reckon, because I was a bit of a lunatic. So I understand, I suppose, now, where before I was probably a lot harsher. And I probably my wife says I tolerate a lot more, but getting good staff, once you get good staff, they are very important. You try and keep them without killing yourself to try and do so. But it's a hard thing. Pruning is a hard thing in any respect, And I'm pretty quiet now. I wasn't in the old days. And it's just a matter of, come on, this soft coaching, and it works for some. And some it doesn't. In the end, you just got to say, arrivederci, and they go on and just bring another one in. And that's what's going to happen in the world, the way it is where it is. You're going to have this massive turnover of staff. Generally, we keep staff. And I think any business who keeps good staff generally is because they've got a good, happy environment to work in.
Yes.
You have to pay them reasonably well because everyone's competitive now and watching what they get paid. But I think it's important that you try and understand that some days they're not going to be on the game and some days they are. So it's easier now, Leigh, at this stage of my career to do it than if I was in trying to run an electronics company or a biotech company. I think it'd be a lot easier like my son does.
Sure. So just on that, we talk about everyday empowerment. So on a daily basis, what do you do, A, to manage yourself in terms of your own energy and feeling good about the world and managing yourself? And then what do you do on a daily basis to be managing and uplifting and empowering your staff?
Myself, I think our friend Ray has been
Oh,
probably very
yes.
instrumental with me. I've started to paint, and that's been a lovely ability to put my mind in neutral, not in neutral, but in probably slow mode is probably a better way to talk. And I
Yep.
can actually think quietly about what I'm doing, how I'm looking after myself. I surf, and that's probably my religion. If anyone's, I don't know if they're religious, but
Surfing is my religion. I like that. Yeah.
because it really, for people who surf, and I'm not a great surfer, but the time that you're in the water, it's probably the time that you're most in touch with yourself and your and nature. But also, I surf with a whole group of friends, and it's a great time to have a time where you're in touch with just humanity, I suppose, the best word.
Well, we talk about, look, one of the reasons we go down the beach in the morning, I say to people, mind, body, spirit. There's something about nature. And of course, we actually, the guys, Frederico, the doctor, the Irish doctor, I talk about the positive ecosystem. Being in and around people and nature, like in the background here, Gary's vineyard, it's just fantastic down there in Turner Lane in Denmark. Something happens when you're in touch with nature, and at the same time around positive people doing things that get your serotonin and your dopamine up, which again is what surfing does, all of those things. So just as swimming in the ocean does, which is different than swimming in the pool. So as you say, and then painting, that's the right side of the brain, the creative side of the brain, which clearly as an entrepreneur, thinking of ideas and solutions and why and all of that is such an important thing. We talk about whole of person, whole of business empowerment. So because the whole person comes to work, some of those people you've got working with are mothers, they're students, they've got lives beyond work, and so acknowledging all of that. So then what do you do on a daily basis to keep the vibe right? Because we say that part of the role of the business owner and the chief exec is to manage the vibe, the vibration, the energy of the business. So what do you do on a daily basis to get that right?
One of my classic saying, you have to. I said to my son the other day, who's just come over for a new job, I said, I always find as part of the philosophy is that I try and what I call walk the factory floor, right? Right. You have to be there. You have to be with them, And I might serve on the till a bit. But the biggest thing is to have a positive, happy, responsive attitude. And I think that actually does as much. So firstly, be happy. When you go in the shop, be happy. It doesn't matter what worries you've got in the world at home. I've got to be, as the person who leads the team, having a positive, happy attitude. You have the world falling around with it, but trying to be happy, I think helps. Because when you go in and you're happy, they go, I always talk about leave your troubles at home. This is a time where you don't have to worry about those things. And then if they are still down, and sometimes you do, quite often I'll take them aside and say, how are you? It's very simple. There's one thing, like if you pick up a friend or a mate is in trouble or is a bit depressed, one of the best things is say, how are you?
Yep.
Talk to me. What's wrong? Right? Because I think they say a problem shared is a problem halved. With all those colloquial bits, and I think that's true. If you talk to your staff about their problems, and, from a business owner, who, if you're successful, $100 may not mean much to you, but someone who's got 3 kids, has got a dentist bill, a meal bill, understanding that they have those difficulties, and sometimes I might be just saying, look, are you okay for money?
Yep.
Right? It might not be that you'll give it to them, but the fact that they know that if they get in the shit, excuse my French, if they get in trouble, they can actually rely on someone to help them. And I think it's like in any business, like I have with Theo and having those mentors, having a support person or someone in your business that you feel if the chips are really down, you can go and say, look, I'm in the shit. And you may not be able to physically help them with the money, but you may be able to help them in lots of ways to, so again, no, there's no such thing as no, right? How do we work around this problem? You've got a debt. How big's the debt? Well, where's your money come from? You're working up. Can I give you some more shifts? I think understanding their problems and empathy, I think happiness and empathy is probably the best way of describing it.
Yep,
if you're happy and you have empathy and understanding about their situation, because if you've got someone coming to work who needs $500 a week or $1,000 a week, and they're only getting $300 a week, you know they're going to have a problem. So understanding their situation, I suppose.
No, that's brilliant, mate, because we talk about whole of person. I was just looking at some data the other day around where people have had massive improvements in staff engagement, less turnover, when all of a sudden you say, what are your goals in life? I want to buy a house, or I want to finish off my degree, or I want to buy a car, or I want my kid's sick. Well, let me help you with that. Not as you say, even if you're physically not giving out the money, your brain and your experience and your attitude, when they're down emotional state wise, the chances of them coming up with a good solution is not good anyway. So just the fact that you're in their corner, and they know you're in their corner, there's an immediately a positive engagement, and everybody needs. So just say that beautiful question of how are you, and let them talk and bounce ideas off. Whole of person, that's what we say, whole of person, whole of business development. The whole person comes to work, not just the work person. And as you say, you making the conscious decision. If the world's falling down around me, I'm leaving that at home. I'm bringing the positive Marshall to work. And so we say to people, who showed up today? Was it the positive person? In fact, in when we used to coach people in retail, we'd say, leave your shit attitude in the bin at the door, and you can pick it up on the way home if you want to, but don't bring it into the shop.
Fine.
Because the young kids, I mean, most people don't realise you can actually choose to not bring that attitude into the door, and yet we've seen so often in big businesses as well. We know the mood of the manager sets the mood of the day, and people will even say, what mood's he in today? Because particularly if the manager is inconsistent with their mood, what mood's he, that sets the tone, the fear level in the office. So the fact that you then make the choice, no, I'm going to make sure I'm positive and I'm the cheerleader, is such an important. So just on that, what do you do in terms of your own personal development, or reading or listening to things? What is do you read books, or do you listen to things? What do you do in terms of your own knowledge and energy?
I particularly interested in probably history or historical novels. So I bought a few things like.
Oh, right. Okay. What's that one? I can't see.
That's called the New Silk Road. So it's about the development of China, and the New Silk Road, what's happening in China. Right. This is my latest read, which is quite interesting.
Wow.
It's about the Australians who went behind the Japanese lines in World War II.
The Z Force.
And some techniques they used which weren't very nice, to stimulate the native Dykes to kill the Japanese.
Right. Wow.
And for me, it was poignant, because I spent some time in the longhouses in East Malaysia on one of my little sorties in my life. And it was very reminiscent of the country and the people that I met, and probably the most influential book that I've ever read, and I still read quite often.
Yes, Sun Tzu, The Art of War.
Yeah. And if you have a look through this, most of the way through the book, I've got scribblings and lines, a passage underlined. And it is, for me, for doing business, right, it has been a good guide to understanding techniques when you're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
What to do with the enemy, how to attack the enemy, what do you do with allies. And it's been a bit of a base since I started my entrepreneurial thing, because it actually quantifies what people do and how people do it in a different different way. But
I
that's
think was it 250 BC? Was that
yeah,
roughly
a
when it
long
was?
time ago anyway.
It's at least 2,500 years ago. I think some outrageous number.
Yeah.
We use a couple of Sun Tzu Art of War quotes, not the least of which is "Know the enemy, know yourself. Need
Yeah.
not fear the result of 100 battles, but
Yeah.
know neither the enemy nor yourself. You'll succumb in every battle."
Yeah.
Which comes back to why we talk about the importance of knowing yourself and personal
Yeah.
development,
Yeah.
that inner world stuff. I mean, the other interesting thing around the use of power, I'll never forget, where managers weren't one of the things we know in teams is that people hate the fact that a manager doesn't act on aberrant behaviour. You know, in other words, the person's
Yeah.
coming in late, they've got a negative attitude, they're bullying, they're not abiding by the rules, they're not even hitting anywhere near performance target, and the manager still doesn't deal with it. And Sun Tzu, the Art of War, says to one of the generals, he says, well, "I've heard you're a weak general. The troops don't respect you. You need to show that you can use power." He said, "How do I do it? Get your two favourite eunuchs, bring them out the front of everybody, and cut their heads off."
Yeah. So
Now, that's two and a half. That's like whoa. So that's an extreme use of power, of course, but one way or another, being able to show that I'm going to nip things in the bud if I need to. That's an extreme use of nipping in the bud. So, mate, I'm very impressed with your reading there. That's because we say leaders are readers, and it was far back as Napoleon Hill. He said the key to success is the continual pursuit of knowledge, and so often we see, successful people reading autobiographies or historical pieces to learn from the greats of the past, which is, Isaac Newton said, the reason I've seen so far is because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. And what you've talked about this morning is you've stood on the shoulders of giants, the Kalises and so many of those others. And of course, what's going to happen is these kids that are working with you and your daughter and your son are learning from you.
They have. I've been lucky. The fish and chip shop's a good example of all the staff that went through, and there's a lot that have gone through there. Young people, they've all gone on to be lawyers, doctors, nurses, dentists, and it's actually part of the thing is that they've often still come back and say hello, and appreciate the fact that if you have systems and rules, they understand why.
Yeah. Yeah, you've taught them. I mean, that's why so often people say McDonald's is such a good place for kids to learn about systems and procedures and cleaning up, taking ego out of the way at times to go, mate, I'm too good to clean the toilet or I'm too good to, sweep the street. But no, you're doing it because we want a high standard, high quality organisation. So as we move to the close, Marshall, is there anything I haven't asked you that you think I should ask you about that's going to help people, be they starting their business or somewhere up the ladder of business evolution? Anything you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Not much. There's a couple of because I've been involved in China. I think one of the best sayings I've ever said is, and it also applies to ability, not only money, but the Chinese say money talks but real money whispers. And I think that's a very good analogy to say what you should do is that. And we talk about things about what you've done, not who you've done them for or why you've done them, but just being sympathetic for everyone else in the world, right? As I think I made some notes somewhere here. I said, like the role of us as entrepreneurs, I think, is as much about community and humanity. We make money because of it. And I think we should try and make an effort. Like now, I'm lucky, I'm sort of older. I'm not probably as driven as I used to be, but I think we have a different role. We have a role to impart that sort of happiness and drive. I try and do it with my son and my daughters. And it's important. It's important that we actually believe that being an entrepreneur is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. As
Absolutely.
Some people say, it's not a great thing to do. And it's people like, the Kalises and a lot of other business people who I'm not aware of in the mining industry who've taken the risk, had a go, who inspire others to follow them. They're the guys who we should thank. So that's about all.
Great, Marshall. I mean, what you're talking about as we talk about conscious entrepreneurialism, literally at the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games the other day, the fellow that founded Grameen, the mobile phone company in Bangladesh, then set up the micro lending. Now he's doing micro lending around the world. Mainly they're lending to women starting small businesses. And he's saying, using business as a vehicle to empower the world. In fact, he says the 3 zeros: zero poverty, zero net carbon emissions, and there's one other zero. But part of the zero poverty is let's train as many people as possible to be able to run their own businesses and be self-sufficient. So he's gone way beyond saying, I want to run a business and make some money so my kids can go to a good school and I can have 4 houses. He's saying, I want to use, and not dissimilar, Branson talks about it as well in terms of, besides, getting into outer space, is they've got the elders where they meet. What are the world problems and challenges we've got to get our heads around? But you're doing it on a scale there in Cottesloe, the community that's there, and so many people at different levels. So, over the years, people give entrepreneurialism a bad name, but in general, there's so many, as you say, kind, humble, heart-led people that are making a difference with their immediate business, but then making a difference in the lives of the next generation that are coming through. So, Marshall, thank you so much for being part of this Everyday Empowerment Institute. I've got everything. Talk about how to get up the ladder of business evolution. There you are. The 10% extra law, the have a go. Nothing is difficult. It just goes on and on. The empowerment with, I've got 2 or 3 pages of notes here. Staff as family and team. So many great lessons, mate. Thank you so much for your time. Any final thing you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, mate, I'm fine. Just enjoy your life, and the most important thing is family.
Thanks, mate. See you down the coffee shop.
Clear, mate. Catch up.
All of it. Thanks, Marshall.
Bye.
Bye.